with Jim Cameron. Okay, Stu, would you like to introduce Jim?
Sure, sure. Welcome, Jim. Thank you for coming by today.
Of course.
For those of you who don't know Jim Cameron, he's our guest today. He's a longtime commuter advocate and commentator on transportation issues in the state. Born and raised in Toronto, Jim attended Lehigh University and then worked in broadcasting and journalism in Hartford, Boston, and New York City. He's a recipient of the George Foster Peabody Award for his work at NBC News. In 1993, he joined the Connecticut Metro North Railroad Commuter Council, where he served for 11 years as the vice chairman and 4 years as its chairman. Since 2003, he's authored a weekly news column, which I'm sure you've all seen, in the Hearst papers in Connecticut. Every Monday morning, I know I look forward to reading Jim's column. I'm sure you guys do too. He's also the author of a new book called Off the Record, Confessions of a Media Consultant. He lives in Darien for 25 years, where he serves as the program director of the town's government TV station, Darien TV 79. He also serves on the Merritt Parkway Conservancy and Darien's representative town meeting, but he says he's got no aspirations for a higher office. The only thing he's going to run for is the train, he says. Okay. Today, Jim's going to give us some his views on what the world might look like in transportation after the pandemic. So welcome, Jim, and it's all yours.
Thank you so much. It's so great to be back. I really enjoy coming and talking with you guys from time to time. So I'm going to share with you some PowerPoint to begin with. And as I go through this little bit of a lecture, if you have any questions that this seems to prompt, by all means, use the chat function and we can queue those questions up as I go along. Yeah, the only thing I'm running for is the train. I sure wish I was running for the train a little more often these days than I seem to be. But I really want to talk about the future as well too. So, as Stu mentioned, I am a commentator, which is a little bit different than being a reporter, which I used to be. And my column runs every Monday in the Stanford Advocate. My role model for this job is Tom Friedman from the New York Times, who says as a commentator, he sees himself either being in the heating business or the lighting business. And I will admit to deliberately being provocative from time to time, putting a fire under people's rear ends to get them thinking or talking about issues. So that's the heat. The light is hopefully the fact that I support my arguments with facts. So as I go through this presentation today, I'm going to present some facts, and you'll hopefully understand where I'm offering my opinion as well too. So what I want to cover today is where we were in transportation before COVID hit, what has certainly happened since, how we are all adapting, both train, bus, highway users as well too, what I think are some potential dangers ahead. I also want to talk about what's being debated right now up in Hartford. And this is the Transportation Climate Initiative and how that's going to impact on your transportation. And as I say, we'll take Q&A at the end using the chat function. So put those questions in chat if you have any. So how's Metro North doing? Good question. A year ago, they were carrying 3.1 million passengers a month, 97% on-time performance, 2 to 3 trains every hour in rush hour, at least 2 trains per hour off-peak. Stanford is blessed with more train service than that because they also have the local trains. If you're going to New York and the express was too crowded, you could always hop on the local and get plenty of room to spread out. More recently, on-time performance has improved. The number of trains in rush hour has continued, but they're down to 1 train an hour off-peak outside of the rush hours. Ridership, however, is down 78% on weekdays, down only 57% on weekends. And I still don't understand how that is, that there are more people than used to riding the trains on the weekends. I don't know where they're going. I mean, the restaurants are still kind of semi-closed in New York. Broadway's closed. Museums are difficult. But there's a hopeful sign that ridership is there. But weekdays, you know, the regular 9 to 5 guys and gals who used to be the bread and butter of Metro North, they're not coming back yet. This is what the trains looked like in the pre-COVID days, if you remember. And people were, you know, standing an hour, hour and a half and paying $350, $400 a month for the privilege of commuting into New York City. This is what they look like these days. Not completely empty, but certainly lots of room to spread out. And one of the reasons they're still running full train consists, they're running 8-car trains, is they want to give people plenty of room to social distance. Grand Central, however, looks like a ghost town. This is an actual picture of what it looks like. It's still pretty empty. Most of the restaurants are still closed, and it's very quiet. Parking, which used to be a huge issue, the Stanford Garage, I think, still has a waiting list. Here's a picture of Fairfield 11 years ago. In Darien, there's still a 5 or 6 year waiting list for annual parking permits, but these days, plenty of room, lots of empty parking. If you want to take the train, you're going to have no trouble finding a parking space at almost any of the train stations. This is a guy called Metro Man. I don't know if you've ever met him or seen him. He is the mascot for Metro North. And I don't know who the summer intern is that gets the short straw and has to wear this little outfit. But he's been running around the whole railroad system, passing out masks. Commuters on trains are being given free masks by conductors if they don't have them. They've been trying very hard since early days to encourage people to wear masks. They had to educate them as to how to properly wear a mask. You know, nose and mouth. That's the only way they're really going to be effective. You don't wear them around your neck like a necktie. And initially, mask compliance was voluntary. Then there was a $50 fine. Now it is a federal mandate. You must wear a mask or you will be facing, well, first of all, probably be kicked off the train if you refuse to wear a mask, and you're facing a fine. And I think that's as it should be, because wearing a mask is a sign not only of protecting myself, but protecting everybody else on the train. And if you're not wearing a mask, you're basically saying to every other passenger on the train, screw you. They were also trying very hard to disinfect the trains. On the subways, which until recently had been closed down every night, they were experimenting with ultraviolet light to kill viruses that might be on surfaces. On the trains on Metro North, they've been basically going around and spraying. I think when this is all said and done, and we understand more about what COVID is and how it was spread, all of this contact cleaning will prove to have not been as necessary as getting the virus out of the air by making sure we are all masked up. They're also working on the HVAC system, the heating, ventilating, and air conditioning system. This is one of the filters that folds down from the ceiling up into the corner here. And they've been experimenting with not just only replacing the paper filters, but maybe installing ultraviolet light to kill viruses as they are drawn into the HVAC system. This woman over here in the orange mask is Catherine Rinaldi. She's the president of Metro North. By the way, and I did not know this, I learned this little fun fact recently. The place you don't want to sit on a train or on a bus is near the intakes for the air conditioning and the ventilation system. In this case, this is near the vestibule. I'm sort of standing in the vestibule here, and the doors are on either the left or the right of me. Why not sit here? Because all the air in the car and all the virus in the air in the car gets drawn past where you are seated before it gets moved through the air conditioning system. On city buses, that row of seats at the back of the bus next to those vents, don't sit there, because if there's any virus in the bus, it's going to be passing right by you on the way into the HVA system. The air on the trains on Metro North changes every 5 to 6 minutes, and that's pretty fast. So this is obviously not a New Haven line car. You can tell by the color of the seats. These are the cars that run on the Harlem and the Hudson branch, and those cars actually have windows that open. We don't have that on the New Haven branch, unfortunately. So these are the good old days pre-COVID. This is, I think, a Danbury train arriving and everybody piling off. It looks much less crowded these days. They're also doing some things technologically to encourage people to spread out on the train. If you're familiar with the Train Time app that might be on your iPhone, this is the one that gives you the schedule. You can buy your tickets, etc. They have a new feature that's coming to the Train Time app that's going to warn which cars on the train are the most crowded. They held a hackathon, and it was won by some computer nerds at Stanford University who took advantage of the fact that every train car, every subway car as well too, weighs itself every time they close the doors at a station and start up in another direction. Because the car has to understand how many more people got on the car at the last stop, how much heavier is the car now, and how much more braking do I have to do to stop at the next station. So they kind of reverse engineered this and said, if every car is taking its own weight and transmitting that information back to the mothership, why not alert passengers 5 minutes before their train arrives at the train station as to which cars are the least crowded? So you'll be waiting at a train station and it'll tell you that the first car and the second car, the ones that are closest to the entrance or the exit at Grand Central, are the most crowded. The most empty cars are cars 5, 6, and 7. So you can position yourself on the platform to get on the car that's going to have the fewest passengers. You're not going to be walking through a bunch of crowded cars to find that seat that you want. This is not available yet on the New Haven line. They promised me that they're working on delivering that as well too. So what you are seeing at Grand Central now, I think, is a lot more mask compliance. You're also seeing guys like this guy constantly walking around and cleaning and cleaning and cleaning. They're doing everything they can to reassure passengers that the cars are safe. And I think Metro North is safe. I have not ridden the train myself because I've had no need to go into the city in recent months. But if I had to, I would. If the trains were not safe, you would be seeing hotspots up the wazoo. There'd be all kinds of people through contact tracing who would be found to have maybe picked up the virus by being on a crowded train. That's not where they're picking up the virus. They're picking it up in other crowded situations. The big issue is all of this cleaning, et cetera, is costing the railroad a ton of money. And there's only 3 variable costs for the operation of Metro North. Labor, in other words, the number of people that they hire to be engineers and conductors, the schedules, how frequently they run the trains, and fares. And those are the 3 things that they have control over at this point. And 1 or 3 of those things, or 2 of them maybe, may have to be adjusted to deal with all of the losses that they're suffering right now. Fares, as I want to remind people, fares on Metro North are the highest of any commuter railroad in the United States. And they've gone up almost 54% in the past 18 years. The last fare increase 3 years ago was a whopper, 20%. Bus fares have also gone up. They've gone up a higher percentage basis. But remember, the people that take the bus, even though the fares are lower, are a quite different demographic than people that take the trains. People that take the bus don't have cars. They really don't have many options. If they don't have a bus to be able to take to get to their job, they don't get to go to their job. And, that means they're probably sitting at home on unemployment or on welfare or something. So we got to keep bus fares affordable. The fares versus the actual cost of providing the ride, fares do not cover the costs. If fares were covering the cost of the operations, they'd be run by a private railroad. They're not. So if you go back to the pre-COVID days, even then, every trip on Metro North was subsidized. On the main line of Metro North, every train fare was subsidized to the tune of $3.25 just to cover the cost. That's on the main line. The New Canaan branch, just a bit more. It's not a very long line. CT Fast Track, that's the bus rapid transit system up in the New Britain to Hartford area. Every passenger is subsidized to the tune of $6.50. The Danbury branch, $17 per passenger. The Waterbury branch, $24 per passenger. Shoreline East, the line that runs between New Haven and New London, almost $50 a passenger. And the winner of this unfortunate contest is the New Hartford line that runs from New Haven through Hartford up to Springfield. Every trip, every passenger was subsidized $55. Now that's the pre-COVID numbers when ridership was high. If ridership is down 80%, what are those subsidies like today? In other words, they were losing money on every train ride when it was standing room only. When the trains are 80% empty, the losses are just astronomical. They have been made up in the short term by the federal government through the rescue plan that was passed by Congress that put a little money in your pocket and put a lot of money in the pockets of mass transit. But this is unsustainable if passengers don't come back. So the big questions I'm asking is, we know there have been huge changes in residential patterns. We know that people have been streaming out of New York City, moving into Fairfield County, which is enjoying a residential real estate boom. We know that working patterns and commutation patterns have changed. What's this going to mean to the future of Connecticut? Will we still need, or can we afford twice hourly empty trains running on Metro North and Shoreline East? And how can mass transit absorb these huge operating losses if the commuters don't come back? And I don't think they are coming back. The Pew Research Center did a survey recently, and they asked, have you ever worked from home before? And 20% of the people that responded said, yeah, I used to work from home even before the pandemic hit. 71% said, yeah, I'm working from home now. And half of the people that they surveyed said, I want to keep working from home. Maybe not every day, but if I can work from home and be productive, my boss is okay with that, why do I want to waste an hour and a half each way on a train and hundreds of dollars in commutation fees if I can work from home? Why work from home? Well, a lot of people have found out that their employers have downsized their real estate footprint. They found that they don't need 5 stories in an office building. They can get by with 1 or 2. They're saving millions of dollars a year on rent. So maybe their office is not there to go back to. Maybe they're going to be sharing an office with other people. And a lot of people have told their employers they'd rather stay working from home, see their kids in the morning instead of rushing to the train in the dark and then coming home in the dark as well too. But there is a big class divide. The kind of people that can work from home are knowledge workers, the people that are doing processing and computers and things like that. If you don't have a college degree, if you're an iron worker or a car mechanic or a healthcare worker, it's not that you're not smart, it's just that your job requires you to be on the job. So who are the people on the train these days? Take a look around. It's a lot of blue collar people as opposed to white collar people. So my predictions that I made in the end of December, I think are still holding true. And that was rail commuters are not coming back, not in the numbers that we used to see. Now, making this prediction did not win me any friends at Metro North. Catherine Rinaldi did not send me a birthday card last week. She was mighty pissed because they're hoping, they're praying, they're expecting that commuters will come back. And I don't think they're coming back because, as we said, people have found they don't need to go to work to be able to do their work, and their bosses are closing their offices. And we have learned, you have learned, gentlemen, I mean, the fact that you're on this Zoom call and you're able to master this technology at your young age, imagine what millennials are doing. Imagine what young people are doing. We have progressed more in telecommuting, whether it's for meetings or for work. We've progressed more in the last 10 months than was expected in 10 years. Fewer commuters, however, because they represent most of the money that comes in, means higher deficits. Monthly commutation passes used to represent almost half of the income that Metro North brought in every month. Half. Nobody's buying a monthly pass anymore because nobody's commuting every single day of the week. And the other question I've asked, and no one's answered this to my satisfaction, is this whole buzz about transit-oriented development, putting development near the train stations so people don't have to have a car. What's going to happen to the development if people are not taking the train every day? Will people want to live next to a train station if they're not using it on a daily basis? The whole state's rezoning efforts and debates in Hartford are all focused on concentrating development, putting multifamily houses near the train stations. Well, if we're not commuting, what's that going to mean? Now, I did ask through social media, I did a poll recently, what would attract you as a commuter back to taking the train? And I crowdsourced this idea, and I got hundreds of responses on Facebook and on Twitter. The one thing people said more than anything else was they wanted to feel safe. They wanted to know that the ventilation system and the cleaning was there. They also cried out for faster speeds. One commuter said that the commute that he used to take in 2004 that was 50 minutes long now takes an hour 10. By looking at those numbers, that sounds like a Stanford rider to me. The trains have been running slower in the past years ever since that derailment in Bridgeport and Fairfield and the deadly derailment in Spoit-and-Dival, because the federal government told the railroad they needed to slow down the trains because they weren't safe enough. Well, now we have positive train control. Maybe we get those speeds back up again. Scheduling. For people that commute east of Stamford, there are too many stops. The train that runs express to Stamford serves you guys very well. But if you're going on to New Haven and you're on a train that's going to make every single stop all the way up to New Haven, that makes it for an even slower ride. So what the railroad is looking at now is changing its schedule so that there may be skip stops, that the train might run express to Stamford and then skip all the way up and make the next stop in Bridgeport. And then the train that comes after that would pick up passengers that are going to Norotan Heights, Darien, Rowayton, Norwalk, et cetera, et cetera. Some people suggested, how about reserved seating? They do this in Japan. There was a cry for Wi-Fi in the trains. That's not going to happen. And yes, of course, bar cars. And that's not going to happen either as well. Dream on, guys. The other people suggested it's still pretty expensive to take the train. Why not lower the fares? Why not have a 30-trip ticket instead of a 30-day ticket and offer it at a discount? Why not do a buy one, get one free weekend fare? Now, Governor Lamont, in his wisdom, I don't understand this one myself, but he announced that Connecticut buses, CT Transit buses, are going to be free on the weekends. Whoopee! I don't know where everyone else is going, but I'm not going out to joyride on a bus that's free. That bus only cost $1.75, one way, and making it free on the weekends is not going to change people's quality of life a whole lot. The other suggestion people had was trying to reduce the labor costs. And one of the people pointed out that Metro North is one of the few railroads, large railroads in the civilized world that still collects tickets and fares on the train. Most other railroads operate on the honor system, where you have to buy a ticket before you get on the train, and they send around inspectors at random. If you're caught on the train and you don't have a ticket, $500 fine. That's not a mistake you'll make more than once. So do we really need all these conductors? They make pretty good money. Maybe we can save some money there as well too. So much for the trains. Let's talk about the highways. I'm sure you've noticed that rush hour traffic on I-95 is pretty much back to pre-COVID levels. But the rest of the day, the traffic is not as strong as it used to be. And it's because we're not driving as much that the state is not collecting the gasoline tax revenue that it needs, because that gas tax subsidizes mass transit and highway repairs, and that's going way down. The Special Transportation Fund, which pays for highway repairs and subsidizes mass transit is going to be in the red. It's going to be in a deficit in the middle of this year because gas tax revenues are down so much. And what's that going to mean? That's going to mean no more bonding for roads or rails. Every dollar that we don't spend to repair the bridges and the roads today is probably going to cost us $4 down the road. Now, you probably read in the newspaper. I hope you read the newspaper. You do read the newspaper, don't you? The Stanford Advocate. Good. Someone's got to be subsidizing local journalism. President Biden has unveiled his $2 trillion infrastructure package. That's going to be my column for next Monday. So I have some thoughts on all that. They may find the money to do all these bridge repairs, et cetera. But until recently, on the state level, where have our lawmakers been? Our lawmakers went AWOL last year. They went home and they kept complaining about all the power that the governor had. Well, the governor got the job done, and our lawmakers have refused to address these issues of how are we going to make up the deficit in the Special Transportation Fund. They won't even debate those funding alternatives. Not commuting saves a ton of money. June of last year, driving across the country was down 37 billion miles. That's $758 million a day that was saved because people weren't buying gasoline. They weren't having to pay for car maintenance and oil changes and repairs. Plus, they were saving a ton of time. And that's the attraction of being able to work from home. You're not wasting time on the train. Plus, there was less pollution. And you remember how clean the sky looked when people were sheltering at home. But it also meant less money for the Special Transportation Fund. So I just want to do a little deep dive on the STF and why it's so important. The money that goes into this comes from the gasoline tax, which is 25 cents a gallon. Connecticut does not have the highest gasoline taxes in the universe, let alone New England. They're much higher in other states. The gasoline tax in Connecticut has not changed a penny since 1997, when the legislature voted to lower the gasoline tax, 14 cents a gallon. Very popular move, but stupid because it's cost us billions of dollars in revenue that would have been repairing our roads up until now. There's also a gross receipts tax on petroleum and heating oil, license and permit fees. Yeah, you go to the DMV, some of that money that you spend for your license or registration, that goes into the Special Transportation Fund as well. Even if you take a ride on an Uber or a Lyft, they tack 25 cents onto that to help subsidize mass transit. And when they run out of money, they bring in money from the general fund. And they also dipped into the Special Transportation Fund when the general fund ran out of money, and they used it like a petty cash box. Where does the money get spent? Well, believe it or not, 40% of all the money in the Special Transportation Fund pays debt service on bonds that were issued up to 30 years ago. We are still paying off projects that we bonded 30 years ago, let alone starting new projects as well, too. Yes, we do pay for the DOT operations out of the Special Transportation Fund, road repairs, snow plowing, etc. Yes, some of those fat, rich state pensions get paid out of this for DOT employees, state police patrols, etc. So the question is, how are we going to pay for mass transit? How are we going to keep the Special Transportation Fund going if we can't rely on the gasoline tax alone? If ridership is down on the trains, then the subsidies are going to have to be that much higher as well, too. Well, this question was asked 5 years ago when Governor Malloy was still in office, and he introduced his Let's Go CT $100 billion 30-year plan for transportation in the state. Being a politician, he wanted to have credit for the vision, but he didn't want his fingerprints on the funding mechanism. So he did what they always do in Hartford. He created a blue ribbon panel, the Transportation Finance Panel, and they studied every kind of funding mechanism under the sun. And they said, well, we're going to have to do them all, not just one or two of them, but we're going to have to do them all. They first of all said, we need a lockbox on the Special Transportation Fund so that money goes in can only be spent on transportation issues. That was approved in a referendum by an 82% margin 3 years ago. They said, let's bring the gasoline tax back a little bit, just a bit, 2 cents a year for 7 years, get it back to the old levels. No one will notice. increase the gross receipts tax. They also suggested a vehicle miles tax where you would be charged based just on how many miles you drove. You know, it doesn't matter where you're driving. That idea was so unpopular, even with the Democrats. They killed it on its very suggestion, and they passed a law prohibiting the DOT from even studying the idea, even though it's widely used in California, Oregon, and European countries. And yes, the governor's own transportation finance panel said we need tolls. I'm not going to revisit the toll debate. That was a year ago. The pain and the swelling in my person has subsided. The bruising has gone away. But I ask in this political cartoon the rhetorical question, aren't we paying tolls already? This cartoon says, welcome to Connecticut, tolls now in effect, blown tire $200, bent rim $399, damaged suspension up to $2,000. We're paying for the lack of repair on our roads, but we're paying Midas muffler instead of paying to have the roads be properly maintained. Final comment, and then I hope you've got a lot of questions. The Transportation Climate Initiative. This is what's being debated right now in Hartford. And your former senator, my senator, Carlo Leone, who left his job in the state Senate to go work for the Department of Transportation, to lobby his former lawmaker colleagues on this very issue, I hope is doing his job. This is an idea to reduce the amount of air pollution we create, invest in cleaner mass transit and electric cars, and deal with the social justice issue that's top of mind in the past 6 months. What does it mean? Well, Connecticut was one of 3 states in the District of Columbia that have been studying this issue for 11 years, and they've signed on to this pact. They've all agreed that what they're going to do is they're going to make the utility companies, the electric companies, the oil companies pay for the privilege of polluting our air. They're going to have to buy permits, in effect, starting in the first quarter of 2023. The money that's raised from that will then be spent on energy efficiency and mass transit, electric buses, maybe encouraging people to sell those clunker automobiles that are causing most of the pollution in the world. They claim that this will create 9,000 jobs and save billions of dollars in healthcare costs because there's a social justice component to this. It's kids in the inner city who are breathing diesel fumes, who suffer from asthma, who don't have health care, who end up in the emergency room. And by cleaning up the air, they're not going to be having you and me pay for their health care because they're not going to have bad air to breathe. The governor promises this will only raise gasoline prices 5 cents in the first year. Others have predicted that in the next 9 years, 10 years, they'll go up about 32 cents a gallon. And the question is, will this get approved by the legislature? And, you know, stay tuned. The debates are underway right now. So I think it's time to take a breath. Here's my contact information. If you want to check out the website or send me an email or follow me on Twitter, love to answer questions if you want to ask them in private. And yes, here's a copy of my book, which is about a completely different topic. My day job as a media consultant. It's called Off the Record Confessions of a Media Consultant. So I'm going to stop the screen share here and go back to the full screen view and encourage you, if you have any questions, to put them in the chat box so we can answer those questions for you.
Jim, we normally, thank you very much. We normally let them raise their hands and ask questions. That's what we normally do.
That's great.
So guys, if you have any questions, please raise your hand. In the meantime, I'll ask Jim my question. I'm just curious, Jim, you mentioned the issue about the bar cars. How come we have not seen bar cars come back, and what is the objective? They were so popular.
Well, they were popular, but they were in some cases 30 years old. They were being held together with gaffer's tape. They never provided seating in a time when we were short of seats on the trains. When they were whittled down, I think we were down to like 3 or 4 bar cars. And they never actually covered the cost of their operation. And my argument was that, you know, in a time when people were standing in the vestibules and the aisles of all the other cars, what we really needed was we needed cars with seats. And a bar car was not providing seating. So we now have all these new beautiful M8 cars. We have more seating than we need, and we have probably more seating than we will need for many years because they were bought in expectation of continuing rising ridership. I don't think we're going to see a bar car because the big reason we never do these things is we don't have the money. They were popular, but they'd be very expensive to retrofit a car and turn it into a bar car. There are carts at Grand Central. I'm not even sure if those bar carts are back yet. I think they went away during the pandemic, but nothing wrong with, BYO. Pick up your own, oil can of Foster's or whatever it is, your martini, your Manhattan, and you can bring it on the train with you. But I don't think we're going to see bar cars. I was actually hoping for a cigar car myself, but that ain't happening either.
Okay. Ira.
Yeah, Jim, that was a lot of information, and thank you.
You're very welcome.
Question is, what is the big objection to putting tolls on trucks on the turnpike the way Rhode Island does?
Yeah. Well, I don't want to revisit the whole tolls debate again. I mean, tolls went away. The governor kind of came back with another proposal this year, which was to put a tax on those trucks. The trucks are the heaviest vehicles that drive on our highways. And I think it is legitimate to ask them to pay for the cost of the repairs to the damage that they cause on our highways. So whether they were just on tolls or they'd be on the form of a tax, I think they make sense. Rhode Island was facing federal lawsuits by the trucking industry that argued that only charging tolls on trucks was a violation of the Interstate Commerce Clause. I don't know what the status of that court case is quite yet. But let me say this about trucks. They're not only a source of revenue. I had a first selectman who shall remain nameless, who, I was talking to, and he said, I have the solution to the traffic problems on the highway. And I said, what's that? He said, ban trucks. Get all the trucks off the highway. And I said, well, I don't think A, that's legal, and B, I'm not sure how your wife is going to feel when her Amazon Prime delivery doesn't show up for about 4 days because there's no trucks making deliveries. Trucks are not the problem that's creating traffic. We put those trucks on the highways. Those are high occupancy vehicles. They're delivering stuff to the stores that we want to buy. So we put those trucks on the highways. Now, truckers don't want to be on the highways at rush hour because they don't get paid by the hour, they get paid by the mile. And the longer they have to waste time sitting in traffic, they'd rather be, look at the service areas during rush hour. It's packed with trucks because they don't want to be, crawling along the highways. The only reason they're there at rush hour is because the stores tell them, Walmart, I want this delivery of the truck at 8:30 in the morning. Why not get Walmart to take deliveries at 3 o'clock in the morning? The truckers would love it. The tolls on the George Washington Bridge are cheaper overnight than they are during the day. There's no traffic congestion. They can deliver, offload that truck, and be out of there before the rest of us get on the highways. So trucks are not the villain. I think that we're going to see an interesting debate on whether the governor's truck tax, not a toll, truck tax makes it to the legislature or not.
Good.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Aaron.
Lloyd.
Unmute yourself there, Lloyd.
No.
There you go. I hear you.
Yeah. I was wondering, there's no discussion yet about the effect of unionism of the transportation industry. Union workers, we have to remember Connecticut is a union state. So if you're going to upend the number of union employees in a public service, like the train conductors, won't you run into severe opposition that probably would not be able to do? So in other words, we'd end up with a vestige, high-cost operations without the service that they used to perform.
Yeah, I mean, they are all those jobs. I mean, Metro North has something like 12 different unions, and the conductors and the engineers are in different unions, and there's all kinds of other people as well too. And they make good money, and you're not going to just lay them off willy-nilly. The railroad has decided not to do any layoffs because they don't want those engineers going off and working someplace else. And if ridership comes soaring back, it's not like you go down to Starbucks and, start hiring engineers for Metro North. So they've kept them on. There have been less trains for them to run. So even though they have not been laid off, the conductors that I've talked to tell me that their income is down about 40% because they're not making the overtime they used to. There were engineers and conductors at Metro North who were working 60 and 80-hour weeks. They were making huge amounts of money because they're doing all that overtime. Well, now they're not getting the overtime. They're still getting paid, but they're getting much less than they used to. I've seen reports of a number of conductors who have, taken retirement, taken that fat pension and decided, I'd rather just, play golf and make money instead of working less hours and being around people that weren't wearing masks as well too. The engineers and the conductors were the early heroes in this pandemic. Train service kept running to make sure that health workers and people that really had to be on the job were able to get there. And they deserve a lot of credit.
I have a Joe.
Yeah. Just, I have a question about your thoughts on ridership eventually changing, because it's a cycle. Now we're in the pandemic and ridership is down, office use is down. But do you think 2 years, 5 years from now, people will forget about the pandemic and come back to life again? And just as a side, another reason the bar cars is when I was commuting, the guys staggering off the bar car and getting into their cars and driving home.
Yeah. Well, I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens with ridership as it comes back. I think the railroad is far more optimistic about a return to ridership than I am at this point. And I'm the train guy. Nobody believes in mass transit more than I do, but I think we need to be realistic. The federal government has bailed out all the transit systems around the country, the subways, Metro North, et cetera. They've been given a ton of money that's going to make them whole through this pandemic. But they've got to start planning for some sort of reduction in ridership or service if riders do not come back. And the worry is, so we got one train an hour, let's say one train an hour off peak now. If Long Island Railroad experimented with this for about a week, they cut service to one train every 2 hours. They reduced rush hour service. That did two things. One, it immediately filled up to standing room only, the few trains that were still running, and it dissuaded a lot of people from even taking the train. They started to drive instead. If you're going into New York City and there's a train only every other hour and you miss that, what are you going to do? Sit in Grand Central for an hour and a half, 2 hours waiting for the next train? Nah. So I think we've got to maintain some kind of service to encourage people to come back.
Yeah, well, the toll that they have in New York City that just got approved, the federal government approved it, that any cars going in past 60th Street is going to be taxed or tolled.
That is on hold. That is on hold. That's congestion pricing,
Right, yeah.
which I think makes a lot of sense, but the city is not, I mean, the city looks like Manhattan looks like a ghost town now, and they're not going to do anything to discourage people from coming back to the office. So I think the congestion pricing idea is a good one in the days when we had congestion. Well, we don't have the congestion now. So I think they're going to revisit that idea for a little bit.
Thank you.
Larry Holson.
Thanks, Jim, for the presentation. Quick question about fundraising for the transit systems. Do you think it would raise a fair amount of money by raising the fees for renewing driver's licenses and auto registrations would help alleviate some of the deficits?
Well,
It seems to be fairly painless overall.
painless, right? Yeah, painless, unless you're renewing your registration or your driver's license. I have two words for you and on that great idea, Larry, and it's a name, Patrick Sasser. Patrick Sasser is a resident of Stamford. I think he's a fireman for the city, and he is the guy who single-handedly created the grassroots movement known as No Tolls CT. He is responsible, I think, for scaring the you-know-what out of every lawmaker in Hartford, Republican and Democrat, from even talking about tolls, especially going into an election year. He is now opposing this idea of the Transportation Climate Initiative and any discussion of raising taxes for the working man that has to drive to their job. And, I mean, there's an argument to be made. Why should my fare on Metro North be subsidized by somebody who has to drive in their car? Now, maybe we should encourage them to try mass transit, but there's a lot of places, a lot of jobs you have to go to around here that you can't take a bus or a subway or a Metro North train to get to. And I think it's going to be a hard argument for the legislature to make that they should be asking drivers to pay more to subsidize mass transit. I think there are other ways of creatively doing that. Look at your electric bill. There was a great article in the Stanford Advocate this week about why electricity costs are so high in this state. Well, something like 20% of your electric bill is not for electricity. It's for all kinds of other social movements. And the legislature, as you were kind of hinting at, Larry, said, well, how can we raise money in a painless fashion that nobody will notice or blame us for? Put it on the electric bill. Everybody has to pay for electricity. So our electric bill is for paying for more than the electricity that we use. And I think it's, people are not stupid when it comes to raising taxes. In the case of New York City, the MTA, the parent organization of Metro North and the subways and the buses, raised a lot of their money through real estate taxes. Now, if real estate's not in demand in the city and those revenues are down as well too, they have to revisit that whole model.
Oh, wow.
Who's next on the hit parade?
Al Pretty.
I think,
Hi, Jim.
Hey, Al.
Stu, can you see the list of names? Because there are people
Yes.
that have their hands up. Ira's been waiting there for.
Ira spoke already.
Put your hand down, Ira.
I'd like to, it's Joe D, and I'd like to ask a question.
Okay, hang on to Al Purdy, then Joe.
Okay. Hi, Jim. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. It sounds very pessimistic, but I have a question that you probably have thoughts on. Is there any way Amtrak and Metro North can get together in this area to help improve the situation? It seems to me, if I'm going to a Broadway play, which I like to do every month or so pre-pandemic, I'd much rather sit on an Amtrak train, which is half empty, and get off at Penn Station than go on an empty Metro North train to Grand Central. But that's
Well-
just me personally. I'm sure there are others too.
You can do that. You can take an Amtrak train from Stamford to New Haven if you want to. It'll cost you about 35, 40 bucks.
Yeah, well,
Uh, you know, Amtrak is struggling as well too. Amtrak ridership has not come back anywhere near what it used to. Even on Acela, the high speed train up the supposed high speed train that goes to Boston and Washington. You know, that train's been running half empty. They've been lowering the fares on that. They were doing buy one get one free weekends and all kinds of incentives as well too. Amtrak does protect certain runs on Shoreline East. But I don't think that if you were let me put it this way, if you were uh, uh, an Amtrak passenger going from Boston to Washington, would you want a bunch of freeloaders from Stanford getting on your train just to go one stop to, Penn Station? Now, if you want to go to Penn Station, I have some good news for you. There is a project that's been underway building a new train station underneath Grand Central. It's called East Side Access. And way down underneath Vanderbilt Avenue, I mean like 5 and 6 stories down, they have carved out of solid rock a new train station that's going to be used by the Long Island Railroad. That's going to be able to come in underneath the East River and come down underneath Park Avenue under the existing tunnel and go to a new train station underneath Grand Central, underneath Vanderbilt Avenue. And that should be open sometime in the next couple of years or so. It's like way over budget and way behind schedule. But when that opens, that's going to allow some Metro North trains, instead of just going to Grand Central, to instead go across the Hell's Gate Bridge like Amtrak does and end up in Penn Station. So you may be able to get to Penn Station and just pay Metro North fares sometime in the next 2 or 3 years. I hope Broadway's open for you to go to too,
Joe DiBortolo.
Joe.
A question on the Greenwich way station. Several years ago, they did a test run. It was open for a month or several months. And during that period of time, they found many trucks that were very dangerous, bad brakes, overweight, what have you. They got those trucks off the road. They collected a lot of fines. And then after the test, they shut it down, and it's been shut ever since. Why the heck don't they open it?
Jim, you're muted.
Jim's muted.
You're muted, Jim.
Is he talking to somebody else?
I'm sorry. The cable guy is here trying to fix things.
Because you were muted.
Okay. You're talking about way stations, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, good.
Specifically the one in Greenwich.
Okay. So the way stations used to be open all the time. And they had a problem of well, two things. Mixed jurisdiction. They're half of the time sort of run by the Department of Motor Vehicles and the other half of the time by the state police. So they were always vying as to who's going to make the money off of the fines that are charged. The biggest problem was that Senator Nickerson, who was the Republican state senator from Greenwich, was getting too many complaints from his constituents about trucks backing up on the highway and idling their diesel engines at all hours of the night and day. So they went to a rotating pattern. If the Greenwich station was open, the one up in Danbury on 84 would be closed, and vice versa. Yes, every time that way station is open, and I think it's still open on a random basis, they capture all kinds of truckers who are overweight or haven't had their rest periods, and fines are issued and safety is improved. But unless all of those truckers are captured at every way station, every time that Greenwich station is open, truckers coming up from the south on 95 know the Greenwich station is open. I'm going up to New England. I'll go up 684 and I'll go across through Danbury because they're not open. So truckers are not stupid. Unless they're all open all the time, they're going to be, you know, they'll be skipped by the people that are the most dangerous.
How do they know, how do they communicate with each other these days, the truck drivers?
Cell phones.
Used to be,
Phone,
well, that's
Waze,
individual, but
apps, CB radio. I mean, there are, you know, trucker groups that alert each other.
uh-huh.
You know, the rest areas in New Jersey, you know, if you're a trucker, you pull in, you probably, you know, talk to somebody and he tells you, you know, what's closed, what's open. There's probably apps that they have that, you know, Waze, you know, WAZE tells
Yeah,
them, you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
Greenwich is open, go up to Danbury.
right. Alan Krim.
To have all the way stations all the time?
A question on the Stamford parking garages.
Yeah.
The Stamford garage is in part falling apart. There is something like $50 million approved for a replacement. In the immediate term, not a lot of demand for parking, but what is going on at the state level with the development of that replacement garage?
Right. So I'm not going to go through the whole 10-year horror story about what happened with that garage. But the short answer is that the existing garage, the old part of the garage that you can access from the train station across that upper walkway is falling apart. Concrete is falling from the ceiling. Rebar is showing up. They've closed a couple of floors because they're not safe. Rather than repair that garage, what they're going to do is they're going to tear it down. But first, they're going to build a new garage on a piece of land at Washington Avenue, just west of where the train station is now. There are designs for a new garage, and that project, I'm told, is still underway. That's going to be 6 or 7 stories tall. There'll be various ways of getting in and out of that garage. And when that garage is open, then they can close the old garage, the one that's falling apart. They can tear that down. And to be determined is what's going to happen there. Are they going to put up a mixed-use office building that was originally planned? Are they going to put up condominiums? I don't know, an aquarium? What are they going to put up there? But they will tear down that existing garage when the new one is finished.
Okay. Lloyd, did you have another question, Lloyd?
Uh,
Your hand is still
no,
up.
my hand's still up. I thought I just lowered it. Oh, look at that. I pressed it. and it went down.
Hey, Lloyd.
Anyway, I could always ask the question. Jim, one thing I know won't be built there is a brothel. But my main question is,
Not touching that one, Lloyd.
what is realistically possible in this state under our type of legislature composition, being all Democratic? What is really possible that the legislature can do, and what they, in reality, is what they really can't do?
Well, that's kind of a philosophical question, Lloyd. I'm, you know, hey, I didn't elect the legislature. Voters elected the legislature. If they don't like the legislators that they elected, put somebody new in there. They have a super majority, so you'd think they'd be able to get something done. But I think that the legislature is, I've been quoted as calling legislators gutless weasels, okay? Not my state rep, not my state senator, but in general, I think they are reluctant to make decisions that will be unpopular and might cost them their jobs. That's why we have been studying the issue of transportation for decades, but we really haven't done much. They didn't want to vote for tolls. They're reluctant to talk about this gasoline tax increase. They want to just keep studying issues rather than making some decisions about them. This may change now that the federal government may, if Congress agrees, come up with the $2 trillion that the Biden administration is proposing to invest in infrastructure, if we have money that's flowing into the state, maybe the legislature will find creative ways of spending it. But it's not a Democrat or Republican issue. Government, we get the government we deserve. We elected these people. And if we don't like the fact that they're refusing to make decisions and make tough choices, vote them out. Every 2 years, you get a chance. We got time for like maybe 1 or 2 more questions, Stu.
I think I don't see any more hands up there. So, Jim, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. As always, it's fascinating to listen to you. We really appreciate it.
Thanks.
And hopefully you'll come back and see us sometime, maybe next year. And with that, I'll turn the program over to Joe.
Thank you, Stu. Jim, thank you so much for being with us again.
Very welcome.
Always look forward to your comments and insight and some of the new things that are happening, like when the high-speed trains, which we'll never see in this corridor. But again, thank you for being with us.
You're welcome.
And as always, guys, stay well, stay safe, and we'll see you all next week, God willing, and have a happy Easter.
Okay, well,
Go on, guys. Have a good one.
have a good one.
Meeting is ended.